If you've got any interest in health or wellness, you've definitely heard of stem cells at some point. Stem cells, to put it simply, are special cells which grow and transform into the structures and tissues that make up the human body. These amazing little cells have been the subject of incredible research and advancements in medicine, and also the centre of massive controversy and uncertainty over the years. With the recent boom in regenerative treatments for managing illnesses, injuries, cosmetic issues, and lots of claimed anti-aging properties, stem cells are now at the centre of a movement which looks like it will change how we take care of our bodies and our health forever. But like any progression or significant change in history, there are many speed bumps on the road to this new world of medicine. Myself and Dr. Van Eden travelled to London to visit Dr.Ali Ghanem to try and shed some light on the issues surrounding stem cells and the treatments that they're used in. Dr. Ali is one of the leading experts in the field of regenerative medicine, with a long list of qualifications and experience including plastic surgery, aesthetic medicine, medical law, and stem cell biology. With a special interest in regenerative cells and stem cells, and combining the tools of traditional medicine and surgery with a modern regenerative approach, he explains in this podcast why it's so important to understand exactly what's involved when we talk about stem cells, why there's so much confusion and resistance within the medical industry and in the public, and what we need to understand about these world-changing treatments to make sure that we're getting the best when it comes to our own health and wellness. Knowledge is definitely power, and for me it was fascinating listening to Dr. Ali break down some of the common myths surrounding a lot of these treatments on the market today. It gives me a lot more confidence when I think about taking care of myself and the people close to me, knowing how to sift through a lot of the marketing and sales BS and actually understand the treatments that can help change lives. Enjoy the podcast, guys. This is a podcast about finding answers to human questions, taking control, and feeling good. This is the Human Regeneration Project. So Dr. Ali, just for people listening here, would you mind giving us a little bit of a description or a bit of background into yourself and why you're involved in this field of regenerative medicine?
Thank you very much, Dan. Thank you very much, Sam. Very kind of you, and I'm very grateful for your visit here to the Academy of Aesthetic Regenerative Medicine in London. My name is Ali, and I come from Syria. And as you may appreciate, regenerative medicine is a new territory of medicine. Although we celebrated it by 2 Nobel Prizes in the last decade, one for what we call them the Golden Trio that discovered the concept of stem cells in the early 80s, and one later to a Japanese scientist who showed that any cell can become a stem cell by some genetic manipulation. We still are very, very far from getting this very excited science to be translated into everyday clinical application. My journey came through my arrival into the UK as a graduate student from Syria wanting to go into the field of plastic surgery. And in order to understand the congenital anomalies and errors of development that lead to child malformation, an area that I was fully interested in, I undertook a master program followed by PhD at University College London looking at embryo development. At that time, stem cell biology in relation to embryonic stem cell has been taking baby steps into medicine with lots of concern over cancer, over malformation, over this biological uncertainty of taking these wonder cells, the embryonic stem cells, and trying to help patients such as those with Parkinson's disease or people with Alzheimer, that all aspects of modern medicine is unable to address their issues. So from there, in a very serendipitous and unexpected way, I have been equipped with a basic understanding really of embryonic stem cells and adult stem cells through this PhD that was just starting at UCL. I was one of the first batch in the stem cell and developmental biology program at UCL. When I finished my PhD, then I joined the plastic surgery training program, and I was fascinated how, as a plastic surgery trainee, we need to use almost extensive dissection and incisions in order to reconstruct areas of the body that has been damaged by a disease or accident or a health process, where the embryo is able, without a plastic surgeon, to repair itself in a miraculous way. The embryo scarlessly can regenerate elements of injury that somehow is lost after the multi-organism that is called a human is born. However, in other species, such as the water salamander, the common salamander, for example, this aspect remain in adulthood. So if the salamander loses a finger or a hand or a tail, it completely regenerate that part. So I was fascinated how lower animal forms and us as embryos are able to regenerate. However, after we become outside our mother's womb, we fail to regenerate except in certain organs, such as the liver, for example, and the bone, for example. So a bone fracture that has healed has no scars. That's regeneration. However, a skin laceration heals with a scar. So that is repair rather than regeneration. So from here, as a plastic surgeon with the knowledge of stem cell biology, I then kept an eye on what are the technologies and the translational solutions that are coming from the bench, from the lab, from the universities, that can be used to alleviate common problems for our patients.
Brilliant. So to me, it sounds like Dr. Sam had a very similar story, where starting with traditional medicine, as we call it at the moment, he through his research discovered, I suppose, the world of regenerative medicine that not a lot of doctors, I feel, have the opportunity to discover or the interest to discover, but that discovery has led you on this journey, like it has with you, Dr. Sam, to a totally different field of medicine, I suppose, than traditional medicine.
It's amazing when minds meet and you start talking about where your current interest comes from, how deep we can go and look for the roots for that, because mine started just slightly a different way around. Did medicine and did a medical research degree, and where I had the wonderful opportunity and privilege to work with an electron microscope, and I did a lot of research work on heart muscle cells, etc., through that study, and was exposed to the micro world. And I always thought that's the worst part of my life. I actually wasted 3 years. What did I do? Should I not have done plastic surgery or something that I could actually call myself, And it's only about 15 years ago when I really started to discover, but I have some knowledge in some strange way, just finds its way into my hands. And I couldn't declare why I had this notion or concepts which you have to go and read up, read the publications, do your research, and say, oh yeah, okay, actually this is a publication on this. This is not just in my head, and this is something that comes from my lab days coming in. And I was fascinated by this whole rejuvenation thing. Exactly what you say. Why is it that we can have this incredible opportunity to rejuvenate certain things? Like if I had the wonderful opportunity then to work for quite a few years with burn wound patients, and the amazing work that you would see when a gas bottle explode and nearly give somebody like a chemical peel, and that some parts of that skin, what you think is going to be a write-off, just comes out absolutely looking 10, 15 years younger. Now, some parts where the dermis was damaged as well, of course, that is a scar then, which doesn't look good at all. But that's what fascinated me.
Amazing observation. Exactly. Most of modern aesthetic let us say, aesthetic versus regenerative. Most of aesthetic medicine is about controlled injury to the tissue in order to create a response from the what we call in biology host or the individual, that in the attempt of repairing this controlled injury, they end up with a better quality tissue overall. So that's a very interesting observation that lead us even further in understanding the relationship between the individual's own ability to make things better, but for some reason it only happen when you induce it by some sort of energy or intervention rather than spontaneously.
Ali, and you had a specific interest, obviously, in cleft palate and cleft palate surgery, etc. And how did you link the actual surgical part with that regenerative part in that surgical environment? Or what is your vision to how you see this might go?
That's a very close question to my heart, because my interest in facial deformity in general in children, and particularly cleft lip and palate, comes from my realization that although from the anatomy point of view and from the function point of view, we managed to solve a lot of problems. We know now how to close a cleft palate to the best of the function of the lip muscles, etc. However, when we look later on in life on some of these children, not all of them, they continue to have the stigmata of the deformity by failure of the tissue to grow or extensive scarring that is disfiguring, and all these problems in this, I wouldn't say the minority, in this sizable cohort of patients who underwent successful facial reconstructive surgery, still is not able to bring them back to full normality. And they almost hold the memory of the original deformity throughout their life in sort of stigma that to some people they are able to face this stigma and these by having a robust psychology. But those who are for some reason more vulnerable, they might be held back significantly by these things. So I always thought, okay, can we manage to avoid these sequelae of our surgical techniques by optimizing the healing process towards regeneration rather than scarring? And B, even if we couldn't, and then somebody end up with a sequela, how can we work in a secondary nature after the original repair to optimize that outcome from both the functional part, like for some patients, for example, the collapsed nose might prevent them from being able to breathe after a successful closure of their cleft. Or from aesthetic point of view, some people after successful repair of the lip and the nose might still have deformities which will render them less confident in pursuing normal social life, going out with peers and finding love and building families. It's not the rule. Many people have robust psychologies and they move on beyond such deformities. So from that end, I really tried to think how I can marry my background in stem cell biology and the translational research that is emerging now with the new technologies, and improve and optimize the outcome of facial reconstructive surgery.
So basically you would think about having the basic surgery done and then measuring outcome as you go on, and you think there might be refinement necessary on outcome. You add your regenerative type of treatments and technology to optimize that outcome.
Exactly. Unfortunately, many people misunderstand current regenerative surgery or regenerative medicine available tools. We would like to have regenerative medicine or regenerative surgery treating everything, like what we would see in a salamander. but that we know is very, very far from the reality at the moment. So therefore, it's very important to understand that although the stem cells are wonder cells, but they are wonder cells most often in the dish, and in a very controlled way, some of the lessons learned from the dish can be translated into everyday patient's care.
What I find very fascinating here is I obviously spend a lot of time around Dr. Sam and people like yourself, and what you've just said there is regenerative medicine is a tool that you have used to enhance the quality of life of your patients, which I think is the goal for most treatments. Why do you think it is then that a lot of other professionals are so resistant to this field of medicine? Why do they discredit it in some cases, or just actively try and turn people off it when you're not sitting here saying that it's the only way to do anything, and you've just stated it is a very good treatment when used in the right conditions with the right patients? Why then is there a fight against it? Why is there resistance?
Excellent question. Recently, I have been invited by my mentor, who I spent some time with in the Free Hospital of Brussels in Belgium, Professor Mustafa Hamdi, to talk about aesthetic medicine in a forum that looks at controversies and technologies in plastic surgeries. And as you could see, the invitation was for a forum that addresses controversial issues and updated technology. And I thought that this is a match that couldn't have a better fit, because regenerative medicine is controversial, and also it is related to some innovation and technology centered. Now, in that talk, when I went to Brussels, I used which I thought a little bit kind of unorthodox way of addressing a very serious scientific audience. I used the very famous title of the movie, like the classical movie, The Good and the Bad and the Ugly. So I told my audience, to their smiles, my talk was the last talk. People might have been exhausted from the conference. I wanted them to engage with this topic. I told them regenerative medicine is about the good, the bad, and the ugly. And these are the reasons behind the skepticism and some unfortunate disasters associated with it. I will very briefly explain. So the good in regenerative medicine is it's a truth. Regenerative medicine is a true science, and the emerging insights and available tools coming from it is not myth. However, the bad thing about it is that unfortunately the claims associated from the financial or industry behind some of these interventions, and some of the kind of desperate attempts of unfortunate people who are trying to capitalize and make money fast out of luring unfortunate or less informed patient, that has been associated with very rushed claims that we will call in our evidence-based medicine unsupported by an adequate body or a strong evidence. So that's the bad aspect of regenerative medicine, that there are been some claims that has been unsupported by evidence. And if you allow me to express the third point, which is probably the most important here, which is the ugly, is that unfortunately some patients died here in Europe, not in low and middle income countries, from some practitioners who have misguided their patients into some regenerative outcome, and they led to some complications that have been fatal in several cases in Europe. Another aspect of the ugliness of the field of regenerative medicine is that there has been some scientists who, because of good reasons or bad reasons, has published some reports of certain processes that the scientific community has credited or accepted as facts, to then later on discover that some of these were not conducted in the highest rigor and honesty in science. And you have all probably remember the scandals associated with some South Korean scientists who, if you look carefully at their track records, you will find that they had amazing discoveries in biology, but some of their claims were not done in the highest of biomedical research ethics, and that unfortunately lead to discrediting not only all their work, the good part of it, but also like the other scientists who are working in the field. We had another example here also in Europe, where one of the leading consortium of stem cell biology leading to a paper reported widely in the prestigious journal Lancet being withdrawn when we found out that unfortunately some of the claims made in the lab were not substantiated, and a couple of patients who has been treated in this kind of fraudulent protocol died unfortunately as a result of a premature conclusions and uncarefully designed regenerative solutions. So to recap, the good and the bad and the ugly aspect of regenerative medicine overshadow the current interest in it. From a way many people have hopes, some of them might be false or uncustomized to reality, and unfortunately there are some claims which has been made, some technologies that has been introduced into the market prematurely, and there has been some setbacks and scandalous realizations in relation to this field.
Yeah. And I think what adds to that is, Dan, also the fact that who are doing these treatments. And unfortunately, it is also true, like I work in the field of hair restoration surgery, we have a lot of unqualified, inexperienced doctors actually taking on surgery. And there's no proper regulation of that procedure and who has been doing it and who should be licensed actually to do it, properly qualified and examined even. So unfortunately, you would find that these people which are actually unqualified, who should not even be allowed to do these treatments because it's unregulated, find their way into the back door and set up treatment centers and start treatments and discredit the whole industry when things starts going wrong. And the very good examples here in the UK, where we now have regulations coming into place and hopefully that is envisioned to improve the quality and safety for patients. But particularly regenerative medicine has been always been very closely associated to the cosmetic medicine, fillers and Botox industry. Have seen a lot of, unfortunately, cowboys coming in and destroying it for those people who really want to focus and make sure that our industry enjoy the ethical standard that it should have. If you look at the older disciplines in medicine, nobody will just walk into a hospital and say, I'm a surgeon, I'm going to do a bladder operation today, I'm a urologist. But in our industry, even unqualified practitioners who are not even doctors, who might just be basic estheticians and beauticians, might say, okay, I'm going to start doing laser treatments. Now, some of the laser treatments are low-level treatments, and they're allowed to do that. I've got no problem with that. But there are many gray areas of types of lasers that just comes into the field of a qualified doctor, that suddenly this person feels, well, I have enough experience doing the low-level treatments. I'm now also going to do a CO2 laser, and I'm going to resurface a face, and not having any medical qualification or understanding of that. So we, from a practical point of view, we're dealing with that ugly part all the time. And unfortunately, the way the media today look at this, and especially the social media look at that, of course, they focus a lot on the ugly, and the ugly, and the bad, and the bad. And the good, unfortunately, is literally just heard on conferences or good before and after shots that you might see here and there. But unfortunately, I think in the mind of the public, the industry is challenged by this very good summary that Ali made there of the bad and the ugly, which is really so prevalent.
I cannot agree more with you, Sam, in relation to the regulation, and the regulation in relation to who can perform what is very, very varied across the world. So we have countries, for example, where toxins and fillers toxin, it means like the muscle relaxing treatments for anti-wrinkles, etc., can only be administered by dermatologists or plastic surgeons. And other countries where we are here in the UK, part of allows for, I would say, only unqualified people to perform it, such as beauty therapists, for example. So I think it's very important to highlight the need for verification of the qualification of the practitioner and their backgrounds, especially over new areas and controversial like treatments, because here unfortunately, because of the lack of the evidence and the emergence of the field, there are many people who try to make advantage of the confusions and the lack of clarity in relation to the law or in relation to the venue and the environment in which such procedures can be done. For example, most of these procedures must be done at least in a place which is accredited by the local health authorities, and in the UK it's the Care Quality Commissions. But you would see that unfortunately many clinics offer PRP, for example, or platelet-rich plasma that is not registered on the Care Quality Commission. So from that end, I think that in the UK the regulators are working very hard in order to address these gaps, but it is also the responsibility of the practitioners themselves as well as the public to kind of optimize themselves qualification-wise for the practitioners and training-wise, and for the public to very carefully choose the venue and the practitioner that they will put their trust in.
Hi there guys, in today's podcast we're exploring the world of stem cells and regenerative medicine with Dr.Ali Ghanem in his clinic in London. If you'd like to talk to us about anything you hear in this episode, you can get in touch at info@humanregenerationproject.com or visit the website at www.humanregenerationproject.com. If you'd like to contact Dr. Ali or visit his clinic in London, you can reach his team at info@aesthetic-academy.com. I hope you enjoy the rest of this fascinating chat. Another aspect of what you're talking about there, Dr. Ali, is this field of regenerative medicine has morphed into something now because of these business models that you've described, and it's now known, as I'm sure you're well aware, the stem cell treatment. So everything in this field of regenerative medicine is called a stem cell treatment in the general public. So I think this is part of the reason why the beautician and the esthetician and the plastic surgeon in the public's eye, it's the same thing that they're doing. They're injecting stem cells, and we've heard this from so many patients that come into our clinic, and they come in and say, do you do the stem cell injections? I had a stem cell injection in this clinic or that clinic or in this country. So the understanding, I feel, is a massive part of the issue here among the public, because if they knew what was actually involved in these treatments, which is what we're trying to do here, they'd be much more selective, and the people who are not offering the premium services or who are not doing them the right way would be forced to all of a sudden pull up their socks and maybe out of the field. But just so people know, and that's the purpose here, what is regenerative medicine really? Because we know it's much more than stem cell injections.
So that's a very sad that's very sad reality, that such a wonderful scientific discovery such as the stem cells. I mean, we have in medicine our library of all published literature, or most of the published literature, put in an electronic library called PubMed, for example. And we, as a doctors, we seek to go and look at new discoveries or new techniques that we are not familiar with to update our knowledge, etc. We consult these medical libraries. And if you go to this medical library, which include the majority of the scientific medical knowledge from the mid-50s up to now, and you put the word STEM in it, you will find a very interesting realization that up to the time where stem cells has been described in the early 80s, the word STEM comes from forestry, which is related to the trees. There was some basic understanding of the stem cells in homeopoietic stem cells and bone marrow transplantation, which happened several decades before we understand the nitty-gritty details about stem cell biology ABC. However, if you look from 1982, when what we used to call them embryonic carcinoma cells, even at that time, the stem cells were thought to be a cancer cells that can transform to all sorts of things affecting the embryo. But now we understand that this ability of the cells to become any type of tissue at that stage, and it is no longer called embryonic carcinoma cells. However, so if you look at stem cell in this database, you find that human knowledge is duplicating every 5 years. So if you go from the early 80s, 5 years on, you will find that the amount of publications done about stem cells are duplicating, and that's a huge amount of knowledge being poured there. So just to keep up with this is a huge task for any practitioner. Now, a reason that has been associated with the expansion of this is that stem cells are everywhere. We have ourselves being a stem cell when we were fertilized egg. That's the mother of all stem cells, and we call that stem cells a totipotent, i.e. this cell is able to create a whole individual. Once this cell is divided into two, it still remains a totipotent. And that's why we have identical twins, because somehow these two cells separate and each one of them recognize itself as a potential for a whole individual, and we have two identical twins. When they then go and divide again, that's like the second division. We have an embryo of 4 cells. Each one of them is able to make a whole individual. That's still a totipotent stem cells. That's why we have the triplets, and sometimes very, very rarely, like 4 twins. However, something happened between the embryo of 4 to 8 cell that we lose this totipotency. So if you take, an embryo which is made of 16 cells or 8 cells, you will not be able to create a whole individual, and then you will have 16 like twins. That is not possible in the biological terms. Now, in the dish, in the genetic manipulation, etc., we are able now to understand through cloning, and you all kind of remember the dolly, the sheep, etc. There is a huge field of genetic engineering that can manipulate these time points. But what I'm trying to say is, we started by being a stem cell, and the majority of the cells of the embryos up until a certain stage are each one stem cell. However, from a totipotent, then the cell become pluripotent and multipotent. And this means that the cell is able to give rise to different types of daughter cells. Like, for example, a cell that is in a 32 stage embryo, cell stage embryo, can give rise to derivatives of like the nose, the eye, like the muscle, the bone, etc. However, later on, when the embryo has developed further and as an adult, We have stem cells in every tissue that naturally, given the normal circumstances, will only give rise to a particular type of cell. So for example, the stem cells of our skin will give rise to the derivatives, the several types of the cells that is in a skin. Stem cells in the liver, stem cell in the nervous system is able to give rise to derivatives in that particular tissue. So as a result, scientists started to associate any type of research with the stem cells. And eventually, if I now take like a small smear of my buccal mucosa from the lining of my mouth, I will scrape off a few stem cells in there. But if I then smear this against you, I cannot claim that I have given you stem cell treatment. So while we have stem cells shedding off our skin sometimes, or available in our, like mouth lining, or if we take a small biopsy from any tissue, we will harness or we will accidentally include some stem cells in that tissue. But it doesn't mean that if then we throw this tissue at our next door neighbor, we are giving them stem cell therapy. When we then move to appropriately selecting the regenerative component of the tissue and safely administer it to achieve a meaningful treatment that will lead to noticeable and discernible results, that is regenerative medicine. But just giving a collection of cells or a collection of body parts that has not been verified by adequate evidence, that is not going to lead to a discernible and meaningful biological outcome, is actually not only unethical but also a criminal. Unfortunately, there are lots of products out there in the market, and one of my very good mentors and friends, Professor Magalon, who is the chairman of the Stem Cell Society of Europe, that the forum that discusses translational research in relation to stem cells, he has led the research looking at different PRP kits and machines. And interestingly, that some of these kits available in the market, the concentration of the growth factors and the platelets coming out of this kit was less than the patient's own blood. So if you just take blood from the patient and then inject it back, or smear it on the skin, or put it somewhere that the doctor intended to have a growth factor related outcome, would have been better than using that particular product or that particular kit. So as you could see here, that unfortunately the regulation has a gap, that then some people are using that gap in order to provide things that has not been validated or verified. I think it is very important for the public to understand that, and for the practitioner to also have the ability of critically appraising what is available there on the market, in order to ensure they only engage with an evidence-based treatment that will help their patients, if not avoid harming it.
In my field, I can talk about the application of stem cell-based therapies in hair restoration. And if I just look around, and I've done a number of observations on practitioners doing stem cell therapies, and again, the place, even just placing that needle at the right depth within the scalp to regenerate hair is so absolutely critical. I always use the analogy to say, if you want to make your car go, and you take the hose of the petrol pump and you put it into your boot, does that mean the car is still going to go? It's not. If you don't put it in exactly the right spot and into the petrol tank, that car goes nowhere. That is the danger I see, Ali, that all these practitioners jumping in and they're just jabbing in to the scalp all these stem cell-based therapies, and boo-hoo, in some miraculous way the hair start growing. And that is the danger. People don't know. Practitioners don't know. The public trust this, because they are absolutely bamboozled with marketing material of stem cell. They completely miss the point. And I think that is the important thing that we discussed today here, is that make sure who is handling that stem cell based therapy and whose hands is that.
In fact, like in my course at Queen Mary University of London, where I lead the master program in aesthetic medicine, we have a chapter related to cell-based therapies, and I highlight to the students, and it's not original, I echo many ethical think tanks and guidelines, that it's not actually ethical to tell the patients that you are giving them stem cell therapy, simply because to give the patients concentrated stem cells is almost impossible without breaching the current regulations of cell therapy. In Europe, there are safeguards to protect the patients, meaning that the patient can only receive certain treatments, and stem cells, to identify stem cells and to isolate them and give them in the right concentration almost means that you are taking the patient's or somebody else tissue into a biological procedure that will breach the current regulation that prevent the patients from receiving tissue or samples related to their cells in outside the operating room. Now we have to distinguish between research and standard treatments. In research is governed completely differently than standard treatment. In research, we are controlling and studying something that we don't know. Usually we have a different standard of ethical approvals and an informed decision that is compatible with the Helsinki Accord for conducting clinical research. But when we are in a clinical practice, we cannot subject our patients to the unknown. The patients come for a clear benefit associated with a clear indication, and we usually use evidence-based medicine that will govern our intervention. So that's why I think it's very important for practitioners and the public to be wary of someone who is saying, I'm going to give you stem cells. And regenerative cells is the concept that we try now to encourage the peers of using according to the ethical principles, because we are seeking regenerative outcome by using growth factors, and regeneration can happen with regular exercises. Regeneration can happen with a healthy and balanced diet. Regeneration can happen by avoiding toxins and avoiding so any treatment that understands the biology of the human and enhance their ability to repair themselves, avoid the damage, is a regenerative treatment. And here, I think people who are claiming stem cell this or stem cell that, when they are doing conventional treatment, unfortunately, there was a clamp down from the American Society of Plastic Surgery on some practitioners in the United States, for example, who used the term stem cell facelift when they used conventional facelift with conventional fat grafting. We know that the graft of the fat grafts include, among others, the fat cells themselves and the adipose tissue-derived stem cells, the fat tissue stem cells. However, when we are giving the patient the fat graft, we are not isolating these cells individually and then putting them in a concentrated way as we are able to do in a research context. We are giving them a fat graft. So some practitioners unfortunately use this term to kind of increase their income or lure some uninformed patients, and there has been clear recommendations and warnings from, for example, the American Society of Plastic Surgery against the members to use these kind of marketing strategies.
And that is a real problem for the public, because what they read is stem cell treatment in my local clinic here. Now, I'm not saying that clinic is not perhaps run by a registered doctor. It might be a registered doctor, but again, if that doctor was properly trained and understand the science that we're talking about here today, surely that doctor should not use again the word stem cell treatment. Again, we're back to the whole regulation who can do these things, and that's a challenge that the public need to make sure that when they see the word stem cell, they need to be alert. And I think this is a very hopefully helpful discussion for people to start understanding there is quite a complicated process involved to isolate the stem cells, the progenitor cells, differentiation of these cells, which is done in a laboratory really, which is not happening in my clinic. It's nearly impossible in your clinic, in nobody's clinic, because you need to have a special license to do that. And I think in Europe, I think there's only a very small amount of handful, perhaps less than 3 registered stem cell clinics in Europe. I think you mentioned one
yes,
in Lugano.
indeed, there is like a stem cell bank that is able to meet the regulatory standards for good manufacturing practices. These are almost verging on experimental research, where stem cells are isolated from the tissue and given back to the patient. But exactly this level of GMP, good manufacturer practice regulations, is extremely restrictive, and in each country there would be 1 or 2 research facility or clinical facility that will provide this service. In my plastic surgery practice in the National Health Service, sometimes we have conditions where patients had, for example, extensive burns. They don't have enough skin to have skin grafts, so we need to take a small biopsy from them and send it to these tissue banks or stem cell facilities, where they can grow the cells to a concentration that enables us to use it. But these are very rare indications and cost hundreds of thousands of pounds to make it viable for small practitioners or for cosmetic indications.
I suppose that pure description there, I hope will open the eyes of our listeners to realize a clinic up there in the sticks, or here in the middle of London, or somewhere in rural England or Ireland or wherever, when they advertise themselves as a stem cell clinic, it's not only illegal, but it is actually completely untrue, and people should be alert to make sure again that they seek correct advice from trained practitioners that has the experience and the academic experience and training to perform these stem cell based therapies.
I think you are very right there, and for me, I think it's very important for all our colleagues who are respected practitioners who want to engage with regenerative medicine to engage it with the highest level of ethical standards and use appropriate terms to describe exactly what they are doing. There might be a clinic that might be able to reach that level of regulation, and they are seeking to use a pure stem cells, but that has to be qualified, that has to be endorsed by the local health authority, and the processes has to reach a very high standard. From here, I think regenerative medicine is definitely going to expand, and it will be able to get rid of a lot of this ugliness that is associated with it. It's going to turn the bad things about it in relation to lack of evidence into good things. And I think we will see that with the more public awareness, with a more ethical and evidence-based engagement of the practitioners, with more involved regulators, we will be able to see a better, more promising and more hopeful regenerative medicine.
As a consumer or as someone looking for these types of services, just to condense what you said there, if you're looking to have a treatment like this and you see stem cell treatments, or we're going to inject 1.5 million stem cells into your knee, whatever it is, that's not actually correct. That's what we're saying here.
I'm saying you have to make sure that the practitioner is really qualifying that and ask for evidence of what method is being used to kind of isolate these cells, what kind of technology is being used. You must research it. It's good to have multiple independent advices about it, because there is, unfortunately, until now, despite lots of calls from the ethics think tanks and different regulators of being careful of using the scientific terms for marketing reasons, unfortunately, we still see the odd occasions where somebody is using a specific scientific terms that mean something very in a lousy way for the advantage of marketing.
I think I just want to agree with what Ali said, that you need to qualify that. And the danger is here, because it's not regulated in the cosmetic industry particularly, and it's just now in our very baby shoes starting with regulation. There is a situation where some practitioners are very much regulated only also by their professional bodies, that will basically force them to use the correct ethical standards. But then you have a huge amount of people that has no qualification actually to perform these, that is not regulated, doesn't answer to a board or a regulatory body, and they will continue to use the word stem cells. And I think there is where the education comes in. That is where the watershed is going to come, where the public has to be involved in being educated about this. The public in the end are the ones that's exposed to these two very different worlds of regulated and unregulated practitioners, and they just need to be sensible, and they need to qualify the person that does the treatment.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Dr. Sam Van Eden, Dr.Ali Ghanem, thank you very much for your time. I hope we can do this again.
Thank you very much. All the best.
Thank you. Much appreciated. If you'd like more information on anything we discussed in this podcast, or if you'd like to chat to us about stem cells, regenerative medicine, or health and wellness, you can find us on www.humanregenerationproject.com or contact us through Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. You can also get Dr. Ali and his team on info@aesthetic-academy.com. If you enjoyed these podcasts, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you think someone you know might be interested in this conversation, please just pass it along. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.